I'm Bonnie Kivuka. On my podcast, the Ugandan Boy Talk Show, I've had an honor to sit down with some of the most incredible hearts and minds from Uganda, like Miss Uganda Oliver Nakakande, Joram Ozor Job, the Executive Director of Joram Model Management, Pastor Wilson Bugembe, and many, many more. On this podcast, you get to hear raw and real life stories of their journey, what they've been through, and the people that have inspired their journey so that they can make a difference in ours. Listen to the Ugandan Boy Talk Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Join the journey soon. So yeah, you were saying about the content.
Yeah, the content is too good. Really follow up every day. The different creatives that you really host.
Yeah.
Really speak to us, especially in the Ugandan context where we are really trying to, let me say, just to create stuff out of the blue.
No, that's amazing, and I'm glad I have this platform where I can talk to you guys. And there's a lot of creatives in Uganda, and I just felt like a lot of people don't know these people's stories. Like a lot of people don't even know these creative exists in Uganda. So, it's a podcast that I started to just share stories of us, of what the people do. And I've had a lot of feedback from people that say that, oh, I didn't know this creative. And through your podcast, I knew there's somebody who does this. And that's why I give opportunity to everybody who wants to be on the podcast. And when you reached out, I was like, yeah, definitely. We need to sit down. I like to give opportunities to everybody because I know what it means not to have an opportunity. So how did you find out about my podcast the first time?
I'm an Instagram kind of person, so
Yeah.
I was browsing through Instagram, and then I landed. I think the first was with one of the Ugandan guys called Ishak, and
Ishak,
Ishak
yeah,
has been
yeah,
my mentor, yes,
yeah,
and
Ishak. Mm-hmm.
since transition here and there. So I think it was one of those first interviews that I watched, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
someone is really totally trying to put the Ugandan story out there. And that was,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's awesome. And yeah, I had Ishak on here. I followed Ishak's journey now that he's working at Energy Radio, and I wanted to people to know the behind the scenes. It's all about like people see you on Instagram, but they don't know your journey. They don't know how you've struggled or how you've made it to where you are at that time. So that's the whole reason I want to bring the behind the scenes things that people can't see to then seeing
yeah.
you on Instagram. Have you seen the one I did with Babaluka?
Yes, I saw a glimpse of it, but
Mm-hmm.
I have not really checked the
Yeah,
whole kind of
because I also
to
found
what
out
is
that
that.
you're in connection, kind of connected in some ways, like you know Babaluka.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
Where he has one of those people who have kind of given us a platform in Uganda, especially when it comes to spoken word poetry.
yeah,
Uh, to be specific, last year he hosted me and a group of others with some of his Canadian friends, some Canadian poets that included Randell Adjay, then there was Darwin Morgan, there was a couple of them that came to Uganda just to have a link up with us as spoken word artists,
yeah.
and then we were able to perform before them, they performed before us. And through that, I managed to link up with him, and we've been on a number of projects with him. So
That's
he's one of those people.
that's amazing, and I've talked good things about Babaluku on the podcast. And I don't want to make this podcast about Babaluku, but something that we have in common, like a mutual friend. But
Yeah,
he's hand to help the youth in Uganda, like to help somebody, like especially you guys who are in like poetry, because I know he's also like a Luga flow, and we're gonna talk about this later. How Luga flow is similar to poetry. Like Luga flow itself is poetry. It's just added on to music, like their words poetic words that are added onto a beat and somebody like rhymes with them. But like not only that, there's a lot of other, and I'm part of a group that he created on WhatsApp of like the initiatives, people who create in Uganda. And I met him on a plane, and I told him my story. He was coming to the US, and I was going to the US too. And from then, we've been friends, and I've hosted him on the podcast and talking about his life and how he has supported a lot of like youth in Uganda. And I also checked out some of the stuff you do, like poetry. We're gonna talk about that today. I want people to know what you do and how you got into it. So, to begin with, how when was the first time you realized you're gonna be a poet? You're gonna start doing poetry. And before that, you might want to tell the listeners your name because I missed that because we started talking right away. Your name and how
Yeah.
you got into poetry.
Yeah. I'm by name Geoffrey Senyondo, and I use Geoff the poet as the artist's name that really like my brand name. I got into self branding, I think, by a friend of mine called Farouk. I hadn't even known that it was that important as an artist. But then he took me to that. He's one of my good friends. But generally, I would say so. Geoff the poet starts basically, I think, way somewhere around lockdown time, 2020, and that was I was working as a handyman at Acacia Mall.
Mm,
Hand does everything when it comes to plumbing, electrical stuff. I'm basically a mechanical engineer by profession.
yeah.
So when I met Farouk was one of those guys who came to Acacia Mall as a marketing guy. So he shows he sees me very interested watching these videos, and then he's like, I don't see you like a guy who is going to be in the technical world for some good time. So have you really taken time to really master your craft and give it a shot? So when lockdown comes, I'm like, let me try out because I had written stuff. I was basically a writer, but I
Yeah.
wasn't much of a performer. Yeah.
Were
So
you
when lockdown
were
comes,
you posting these videos on Instagram, the ones the like of your poetry and stuff while you're working at Akosha Mall?
I think I had the only stuff I had posted was the lyric videos because I would record the voice with my phone
Mm-hmm.
and then after effects do some bit of lyric stuff. If you're to check most of the earlier stuff that I posted before 2020 was basically lyric stuff, so I could use the voiceover and then
Yeah.
put it out there.
Hmm.
Yeah,
That's creative. That's crazy, and this is the whole reason I like stories like yours. Like, so for me, who was just seeing your Instagram, I would never guess you were a handyman at Acacia Mall, and that's how your journey started. It's cool when we
yeah,
start sharing these stories about the things that people don't know in the background. Like today,
yeah,
somebody would come on my Instagram and sees I work as an airplane mechanic, so I'm an aircraft mechanic and I have a podcast. So somebody will come and just see that on my podcast. But if I tell you that I worked as a maintenance guy too, like the thing you're talking about, like plumbing, cleaning,
yeah,
I cleaned toilets, I would mow, cut grass. Like I worked as a handyman too, like earning minimum wage to begin with. But it's
exactly.
the cool part of these stories. Like somebody will know, oh, Yatandi Kidao, he started from there, and now he's going on like that. Um, but yeah, and the other thing too, like a lot of people started being creative in not started being creative, but like the good thing that came out of lockdown was
Yeah,
us getting even my podcast. It started during lockdown. I was like, I have time on my hands. What can I do? And just say it like that. And you keep going with your dream. So Farouk found you. And who is Farouk? Because I know you mentioned him, but you did not explain who Farouk was.
okay. Farouk is one of my good friends. Say since 2019. Uh, he's currently the marketing manager at Acacia Mall. Quite a young guy. Actually, I think I'm something like 3 years older than him. So
Yeah.
he's this kind of guy who joined, and I happened to maybe do some bit of orientation for him as a new marketing guy at Acacia. So we had that bit of creativity together as he was coming in case the mall is acting out activations. So we had that talk. I had some bit of skill in terms of graphic design, self-taught skills. So in case some things could not work out with management and he wanted some graphics out, we would sit with him in office
Mm-hmm.
overnight, and he gives the idea and he keeps telling me, change this, change this. So we find ourselves spending the night in office, by the way.
Yeah.
So he became a good friend. He's called Muchivi Farouk.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, even in the small startup I have with him, we have a small graphics company called the Godson Prints, and we usually work together with him and another partner of mine called Sechans Raymond. So we really have that kind of environment of creativity that every time I try to do something, then he will come in and chip in and say, Geoff, don't you mind? This is in the marketing perspective, this would work like this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we got that friendship. And I'm so glad I met him.
I like to hear stories like that, and I like to hear youth getting together and starting an initiative, starting a company, starting an organization. Those are some of the things we want in the world today, other than people spending time putting down another person or abusing another person on social media. Like, we need more of the uplifting than the pulling down of each other. So I enjoy listening to stories like that. You're not only a poet, and I'm not skipping that. We're gonna have more questions on poetry, but the other thing too, you play guitar.
Yeah.
How, like,
Yeah.
yeah, I see it in the background there. So when was the first time you held that thing in your hands, and what brought you to the love of playing guitar?
Yeah. I come from a region, a district right now. I think it's a district now called Chotera district. It was part of Rakai district then. So the other story that I have to really confess here, I'm part of a group that has come through an organization called Daughters of Charity, and at a later stage it was called Children of Uganda. So I'm not an orphan as per se,
Mm-hmm.
but because by then my parents were helping out with organization in Rakai, has given a chance to be part of that organization in terms of my my studying. So they offered to pay my school fees. I could stay in the orphanage places where the holiday or what. So I grew up basically from Daughters of Charity homes. If you happen to get to know information about that,
Mm-hmm.
the late sister Rose Muyinza. So I'm a product of that. So
Nice.
in that case, in that environment, there was a lot of music troop, like groups like the Children of Uganda would go out and they do tours in USA, in UK. But some of us who are like basically not much of the tour team, we could
Mm-hmm.
engage in what we call education week.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know that in Uganda.
Mm-hmm.
So we do education week. We learn a lot of music. For my case, as usually, I could do drums, the local drums,
Yeah.
and that long drum, the so-called
Ngalabi. Hey.
Engala. So
Hey.
I could do that, and then also read out Bible scriptures for that segment of education week, whereby you master the Bible scriptures and then you come and read them out like
Mm-hmm.
that poetic way of doing it.
So before you skip
And
Ngalabi, when I was in school, I went to school in Uganda before I moved to the United States. And we had
yeah,
MDD, and we had this one kid,
yeah,
Senyonjo. So I think
yeah.
Senyonjo. Senyonjo was, he played in Galabi, but he would make tricks of that in Galabi. Like, he would slam it, lay on the ground, and then just hit it like that. Like, did you did you used to
It's
do
one of,
any tricks of that with the Galabi?
it was called the climax. Like
Yeah, climax.
in every dance session,
Yeah.
you have to create a climax whereby
Hmm.
maybe two dancers stay along the stage,
Yeah. Yeah.
and now the drummers and everyone, you have to create a small. It would be more like for the band, the current band here, whereby let's say like those guys, the artist is introducing instrumentalists,
Hmm.
and then someone does a lick riff or a lick solo, something like that. So
Yeah.
even in that setting, we used to do that a lot.
Nankasa. I think it was Nankasa and what?
And Mokola,
Mogo. Eh,
Mokola,
Nankasa and Mogola.
Nakasa,
Eh.
Then there was also for the guys. I think the Western there was that bit of Staguro.
Staguru, yeah,
I
yeah,
might just
yeah.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I enjoy that part of music segment in high school. And when you said Engalabi, my minds went back to like Engalabi, and I wanted to ask you a question about that. But yeah, you can continue. So you talked about in the education week, you did the Bible verses as well.
So there's a person I have knowledge. He now has a school called Tender Talents Magnet School in Kasanga. He's called Mr. Katora. Now he used to teach us a lot to do with music. I was good at math then, but still you could uh, tell you that really, even if education fails, at least you have to capitalize on your talent. So he took us through those sessions. I didn't see that as important then, but I kept doing it. You know? I kept
Mhm.
enjoying the music because I really loved it. I really loved listening to it. I loved to participate in it. As time went along, I didn't even know about the guitar stuff, the instruments, and everything. Because at school, we really didn't have much of that. It was more of the cultural stuff.
Right.
So, as we went along, I think high school, I find myself really, I didn't like music. I didn't like stuff to do with music. So, opportunity came still through the organization. I managed to go to Seta High School for my A level. And at Seta High School, it was much of now miming because miming now became like
Hmm.
my way. Like I couldn't hide away from music, but
Yeah.
I felt standing on stage and now being like that was. I remember I'm kind of a short stature, so I'm a short guy. So
Yeah.
standing in front in front of the line became now more like humiliating to me. I never felt myself. But then now miming became the whole thing because in Seta High School almost every weekend there was a miming session. There was a kadanke. So I
Hmm.
found myself trying to learn songs and then try to mime them out. The guitar stuff now after because it's my whole story is long.
Yeah.
So I happened to by God's grace I happened to get a government scholarship. Uh, I did mechanical engineering at Chambogo University.
Nice.
So when I reached Chambogo University, out of my mechanical department, I could pass by the chapel. It's called Kakumba Chapel.
Mm.
So entering the chapel, I could see guys doing music. Some guy called Tadeo and another guy called Benson. So I really felt in love with the guitar, especially the acoustic rhythm guitar,
Hmm.
because I could feel like guys leading the worship, the guys doing, because most of those guys would sing and then play. So I think one of those guys called Fortunate. He writes the chords for me on a piece of paper. That was C, D, and G. So he
Hmm.
tells me, "You're going to learn from there. That
Yeah.
is your first lesson." But I didn't have a guitar. So crazy because government was giving us some money, some
Yeah.
upkeep.
Yeah.
I decided not to tell mom that I was having that upkeep, that first upkeep. I simply walked to a shop called Glory Electronics around Kampala Road and bought my first guitar.
Nice.
That was a nylon string guitar, so I took it home. I took it at campus because I deliberately decided to keep this a secret from mommy.
Yeah.
So I took it at campus and put it in one of my corners in the cubicle at Africa Hall where I used to stay. God being so gracious, I think sometimes when you're meant to do something, there is a way God aligns with your purpose and makes sure things happen.
That's true.
That that same year, after like the next intake, there came two guys that were so important in my journey as a guitarist right now. There was some guy called Dan Kavunga, and he plays for some band called the Vuga Band. He was my roommate, and another guy called Bruce Viaruhanga, who is now, they were all industrial engineering students. So Bruce comes in the next opposite cubicle, and he was also a guitarist. So They didn't carry their guitar on their first day at campus, but then they found a new guitar in the corner.
Mm.
So they thought that a specialist, a serious guitarist, a guitar maestro of sorts. So what they could do, as long as I move out of my cubicle, they go pick the guitar, rehearse,
Mm-hmm.
especially in this room. So one time I think I had forgotten something in my room when I was going for lecture. Then I came back only to find an empty box. It
Yeah.
was not even a bag, a box. So I'm like, who has taken my guitar? But I was hearing some nice music
Mm-hmm.
coming from somewhere in the hall. Only to check it was coming from the opposite room.
Yeah.
I simply put my book in my room, opened the opposite room, and I found these guys rehearsing some nice melody.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, you know what? Guys, I just need someone to teach me. They said, we are sorry we picked your guitar. We did it. I'm like, I just need someone to teach me. I
Yeah.
don't know anything. Bruce was like, how come you buy a guitar without knowing how to play? I'm like, I just like guitar, but I don't know how to do it. So Bruce said, I remember he looked at me and said, are you really willing to learn guitar? I'm like, yes. He's like, if you're willing, I'm going to teach you, but I want your commitment. I'm like, fine. And the story went on building, building.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that was now 2011,
Yeah.
to be precise, 2011, because I was at campus from 2009 and then to 2013.
Mm.
So 2011, that's when Bruce really got serious with me. We could use the balcony up at the Africa Hall. Sometimes he would go fetch food for me and ask me to rehearse something
Mm-hmm.
until when I fix it out. So he goes, picks food, and then comes back to check on me that like around 8:30 in the dark.
Yeah.
It's like, I doing well, I doing so that's how crazy it was. But
That is amazing, and I love stories like
yeah,
that. Like I could listen to those stories. And when you said your story is long, my story is long. Like
yeah,
for people who have listened to my journey and where I get to where my stories has these corners and this and this. So I
yeah,
just didn't want to even interrupt you and you tell us the whole story of your guitar. I appreciate you sharing that to us, and I let people share these kind of stories because they want another person out there who wants to learn guitar to listen to this story like yours and get inspired and get like, oh, this guy did it. He bought a guitar and he didn't know
yeah,
what to do with it. Like you, I mean, there's different ways you can do something, and that's amazing to see now. Like you're one of the best guitars here. You go to events and perform live. Um, you've been
yeah.
at Vumbula, Uganda, at the Source of the Nile. Were you there as a guitarist or as a poet or both?
I was there as a poet.
Mm-hmm.
My first interaction with Bumbla was basically about poetry. But as we transit, I think the last Bumbla, I had to create something a little, because they give me the space and give me the opportunity to be creative with it the
Mm-hmm.
way I want. So the next, I think the last Bumbla that we had in Jinja, I had the privilege of creating something with a friend of mine called Eduardo Kayondo. He's
Okay.
one of the guys that writes. I met him somewhere last year, and he writes his own music. And when he presented some of that music to me, I realized could add. So I tried to formulate the guitar flow, the rhythm with it, and we created something. So when Vumbla came at this time, I was like, let's create something together, and also a way of introducing him to the stage. It gave me the opportunity to collaborate something with him. Then he also did his own music
Mm-hmm.
on that stage, which was something to give him audience too. Like
Yeah.
maybe the way I got it. Yeah.
Today's episode is sponsored by Dancesoft Gamers. Dancesoft Gamers is the leading distributor of video games and other consumer gadgets like the podcast microphone sets, ring lights, headphones, and affordable smartwatches, and many other cool gadgets. For these and more, visit their website at www.dancesoftgamers.co. That is www.dancesoftgamers.co. That's great. Have you ever thought about? Because I hosted up another poet here. I don't know if you know Manaweka Wix 256.
Web five, six. That
Yeah.
was one of who inspired us in poetry in Uganda.
I have an episode on here with him, so if you get a chance, you should listen to it to listen to his journey and what he does with music,
Yeah,
with poetry. And
yeah,
his episode that we did on here was more like poetry in rap. Are you
yeah.
also that kind of person who writes poetry that can be in rap, or your poetry is just for words? You've not integrated it to rap.
Yeah, actually, I really struggle with stuff to do with writing stuff and formulate it into music
Mm-hmm.
or rap. Then I usually write spoken word poetry, totally
Yeah,
spoken word.
yeah.
So it is easy for me to stand and do spoken word poetry. And when it comes to music, I usually play for other people too to
Mm-hmm.
really do it.
Yeah.
So I'm not so good at that, and I've not really much explored into rap. But
Mm.
for spoken word, that's what basically I do.
You know, the other question I had, it just came in my head right now at this moment. I didn't even prepare for this one. So if you went to university and you did your mechanical engineering and
Yeah.
you went out and you used that degree, how did you then get into poetry? Like poetry, I feel like for me, like this is my head, and even the listeners don't judge my thoughts because this is just again, I didn't think about it. Like I thought you have to get some sort of like training on how to do poetry, how to write, how to make words rhyme. Did you
Yeah.
ever get that kind of training, or did you ever go to school to learn how to write poems?
Now that's really so amazing because I've never gotten like a real training session for this. It's just something that has been bubbling within my heart. Like out of the blue, I just okay, like I could write stuff and trying to formulate it into music could not work. So what would happen would I would get like my script,
Mm-hmm.
drafted script.
Mm-hmm.
Then let's say on important days like Father's Day, Mother's Day, I stand like I would ask for opportunities at church, basically. So I stand at the pulpit, read my stuff, and then as I said, 2020, when I was trying to go through YouTube, that's when I discovered that it is a form of artistry called
Mm-hmm.
spoken word poetry.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I managed to land on a YouTube account like P4CM. Then there
I've
was
listened to P4CM. I love them. I love the poetry. Yeah.
then I landed on another guy that has inspired me from a side indirectly called Clayton Jenny. He's a
Mm-hmm.
pastor, I think, and also a spoken word artist.
Yeah.
So I just met, then later on, I discovered George the poet, who I hadn't known that is even from Uganda. Then
Mm-hmm.
Work 256 managed to link up with people like Mitch the poet. I think that guy will be one of the people you would host here. He has a whole dimension of poetry in Uganda that
Mm.
we've not really hadn't experienced before. So comic, so natural. Then another guy called Sevo Lule. So when I happened to meet them along, then I managed to ask now to ask them how the art is, how everything is done. Then it gave me opportunity to come on board and also express my feeling. The other important person that I've left out, maybe that I need to mention, is called Mogasha. We call Mark the slam poet. Now, this is the guy who leads a group called Lado Poetry House, and this is one of the guys that has totally worked with me from that time when I got inspired to a time where I am right now. Because he's so passionate about the art form. He organizes subsessions with Quivuga and also Lado Poetry House, and he has always invited me to express myself through my spoken word poetry. So you realize I'm now a fusion of so many artists that
Right.
have
Yeah.
kept
Yeah.
inspiring me to do that. So
That's
I'm not
awesome.
I'm
And
not
that's one thing I was going to tell you earlier, that I like that every story you tell us, there's somebody you're shouting out, like this person helped me through this person. His name is this. I love that. I
yeah,
love for you to give credit or where credit is due. Like, hey, This guy helped me to teach me guitar. This guy has helped me a lot to learn poetry. The other guy I've remembered, I've hosted a few poets actually on my podcast. The one episode you need to check out is a guy written to speak. He's an American. He's an author
Yeah.
and he's a poetry. I've hosted him on my podcast too. He talks about his poet. He has his Instagram page. It's called Written to Speak. You will enjoy his poems and maybe you'll learn a thing or two. And maybe he's a guy who is open. He does his poem. He's a Christian, so his poems also like inspiring and bringing hope to people. I love his work. But yeah, I've seen a few of your poems. Is there a short poem you can give us a freestyle of that you can think of now and give us a freestyle for the listeners?
Uh, they say I walk next to my ancestors, that I was the perfect definition of down to earth, that I was such a lad that needed a chair to reach puberty. As if playing with my body parts wasn't enough, they asked me that I should pray that the next birthdays come with ladders so that I could be able to take a sneak peek into my future. They literally dared my body stature, describing me with all sorts of insinuating metaphors. Really, it took long for me to dare dressing in short, because literally every single shot was never short. For me, Mr. Short.
Nice.
So down that valley of the uncertain, I roamed with a mind that only knew feeble. But the darkness within my soul was meant to tremble, a, a victim of myopic centrism. I hung onto that cliff of self-activism until a lifeline was drawn for me to hang on. Scarred hands onto a rugged piece of wood, pierced feet onto a weight below. Seriously, allow me to throw a pulse through your heartbeat, take you down through the journey of what was this guy's understature description. I'm not exceptional, but I'm just intentional, aka the international. Unpredictable, I'm rational in search of God's best direction. With every single ink, I aim to be sensational. I seek to inspire before I expire, regardless of my limited sphere. I seek and intend to explore. Like a camera, I focus on what's important, capture the good times and develop from the negative. And in case it doesn't work out, guess what? I take another shot. I aim to capitalize, to conceptualize, to capitalize on every single shot given, to make him known by whom this steward I own. Speaking of where I'll be without him, surely my little mind could never fathom. For our for I'm part of his design creation. My life not my own, my life to him I owe. Poetic, I'm artistic. Faith fanatic yet realistic. Articulate with a futuristic, eloquent about the craptastic. Draft one, draft two is my mandate. Surely, ladies and gentlemen, I'm part and parcel of this, and for this I will roll. My name is Geoff, the poet.
That's amazing. That is amazing. And for the listeners, if you didn't feel amazed by that, for me, when you were saying that poem, when you sang it, I was like, "There's no way in a million times I could do that. Like, there's no way I could do that. Like, even if you gave me a whole year, like, there's no way I
Yeah,
could do that. Like, and that's why I like God a lot. Like, God gives talent to different people. Like, He gave you that, and for me, I look at it
yeah,
as a talent. And I know there are people who study it, but like for you to be able to recite that
yeah.
when you didn't even go to school for that, like that's a born talent, and it's good. It rhymes. It's I could say everything about it because I know I can't do it, and but it's
You know,
beautiful. I
you know
love
that.
listening to it.
Yeah, there's that bit of identity, a loss of identity, especially when we go through the system and you realize you're not this type, you're not this stature, you're not that. So I wanted in this poem I tried to capitalize on the fact of the description of self, but then get the positive side of
Hmm.
encouraging someone that regardless of how you look like, regardless of your body, regardless of maybe what guys have said about you, there is
Hmm.
something inside of you that is inner that maybe a day will come if you really capitalize on that and you will speak to others. Your life will speak to others, other than just downsizing yourself, maybe pity parting about the fact that maybe you were an orphan, or something has happened in life that has really pulled you down. There is more to life than just pulling yourself down.
That's amazing. I'm easily an emotional guy. When I listen to words like that, because that's what I want to put in somebody else. Like when you say there's more to life than pulling yourself down. Like for me, those kind of words hit me different, and I like to tell other people that. And when I hear somebody else saying those words to me, like listening to them in the headphones, it hits me like different. And I love when people ask for opportunities to be on a podcast. I have people that I host on I request to be on my podcast because I want another person to listen to them. But I also
Yeah,
love when people like you reach out, hey, can I get an opportunity to be on a podcast? I would love to share something, and I love that. And it has turned out that when you people who ask to be on the podcast, it turns out
yeah,
that the words you say here are more impactful because it's from within, it's from your heart, it's not forced. Until sometimes I might force somebody, hey, because of what they do, I force them to, not forcing them, forcing sounds bad, but like when I request to them, they'll be like, yeah, I'll do it. So it's not like it's coming from the heart. It's just doing it because you asked them to be there. But when you have a person like you who wants that opportunity, who's there because it's from within, your words really hit different when somebody listens to them because it's coming from your heart and it's not forced. It's something you want to do. So I really appreciate that, and I like people reaching out. I was like, yeah, let's do this. Let's record a podcast. So I really appreciate that. The other question I wanted to ask you. So, what are the plans of your mechanical engineering degree?
that's a very good question. Okay, currently I can say I practice mechanical engineering regardless of what I do, because I work with a company called Brol Uganda. We are into facilities management, but I'm the technical person on the team. So my mandate is basically to ensure the maintenance side of everything is okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the generator, the major equipment of the property are working, functioning well, and everything. And as I would say, as a creative, it has also enabled me to be able to up my game in terms of what I do at work, because I've usually had to find easier ways to cover my schedule so that I can do the other side. So
Mm-hmm.
if it's record keeping, I make sure it's a timely stuff I do so that it doesn't interfere with my other program. So when you ask me the future part of my mechanical engineering, I'd say I'm into it. I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm not so certain whether I'll do a master's in mechanical engineering.
Yeah.
Really, not really that. I don't think, but I hope to
I think your
all
phone
goes
your
well
phone
to
moved.
ensure.
No,
Mm,
yeah, that's amazing. I wanted to just know about it because I know people who will be listening is like they might also have that question on the back of their heads, like, so what's up with the mechanical engineering? But it's good that you're still practicing that. And Uganda is one of the countries where you're gonna have to tap on every opportunity you have, every source you have, like wherever
exactly.
you can tap there. Well, no, take it out, take it out, take it out. Uh,
Just maybe encourage someone watching this. I think I've tried to study much of the creatives, the likes of the late Moses Joe who we had in Uganda here. The issue is you can't really hide your innermost self over time, regardless of your profession. So I think what would be important is how do you use the space of your profession still to bring out yourself. Now, like for my case, at work, I've made sure if there is let's say, a team building activity, I can't miss out. I can't miss out on sharing my talent with them. I've written scripts to do with company advertisement. in case there is a creative session and they want someone to do a break to entertain, a break, do a song, do some poetry there. I'm there. So it adds value to you as a creative, as an employable person, even maybe as you do your own stuff.
That's
Yeah.
yeah. That's for everybody listening, and that's a lesson to learn. One of the last question, and then I have not the last question. The last thing I'm going to talk about, and I have the last questions I'll ask you before we end these. Congratulations on being nominated in the APVA awards. That's a huge. I know you tagged me in one of them. Like, are the voting still going on, right?
Yeah, actually, the voting ends today by midnight,
Okay.
UG time. Yeah, so it is ending today midnight.
Yeah.
But so grateful. I've had the opportunity of other fellow creatives really pushing for this for me. I'm actually not the only person nominated. There's another person called Diego, the Dark Knight. He's one of my good friends also. He's also uh, managed to be nominated in one of the categories. I think that's the best spoken word video. And we're so glad that at least we are trying to break walls of the Ugandan plus
Mm-hmm.
256, at least get
Mm-hmm.
out there
Mm-hmm.
and engage. And I think the Kenyans have been doing that quite some good time. They've really been doing that, trying to collaborate with Ghanaians, with Nigerians, and for us as Ugandans, of which I'm so sure we are more creative. I'm sorry for my Kenyan friends, but we are more creative than
Yeah.
Kenyans.
I have a debate on that actually because I was thinking like the Kenyans are. I even watched another podcast where they were saying the Kenyans are more creative, or the Kenyans content creators are more like
Yeah,
that's why Uganda some Ugandans have to leave Uganda to go to Kenya to do their
yeah,
content creating there. So that's up for debate. And for me, it's good for me because I'm half Kenyan and half Ugandan. So I'll just enjoy
yeah,
on both on both sides. So, but I think I'm gonna have to do that as an episode to see if
yeah,
people think the Ugandans are more creative than the Kenyans, or the Kenyans are more creative than the Ugandans. I'm gonna leave that out there for the people to decide. I might do it as a poll to see what's happening,
yeah,
but not skipping what I brought out. The APVA awards, no, they're ending today. This episode might come out when they already ended, but I still want to
exactly.
congratulate you for being nominated. Anytime your name is out there, even if you don't win, even
Thank
if
you.
you win, like when you're nominated, it's a win already. Like you being part of that, because people are gonna know you. Every time somebody looks at the nominees and they see Geoff the poet, who is this guy? And then they'll look you up. They'll see your work, and that's a free
Yeah,
advertisement, and people are gonna know you. So I want to congratulate you and keep doing what you're doing. Many of these opportunities are gonna come. I already saw you. You were part of the Vine Awards too.
in the Vine Awards, usually, actually, it's a new category within the Vine Awards, and it started this year, the spoken word. And I have to really say thanks to Vivian Holmes, one of those ladies that is doing poetry in Uganda. One like really on the move. She's really so good, and privileged to be one of the friends in her circles. So it's totally let me say it's a movement in Uganda. Spoken word poetry, I would say we are on a move, and we are so glad that some of those categories are coming in within
Yeah,
the award.
yeah. No, that's amazing. So yeah, we're coming close to the end of this podcast, but I have three questions I ask people before I let them go. One of the first question is,
Okay.
what's a life lesson you've learned in life to this point?
I think I've come to learn that regardless of your low, low points in life, there is always a high point awaiting for you. Just like the way you find a valley and a hill, they are almost close to each other. The moment you find the valley, you'll always find the hill. So, regardless of your low point, hopefully you could look ahead and see if you can find a high point.
That's amazing, and hopefully somebody will listen to that and pick out, make it their life lesson too, or relate to it. The other one, what gets you excited about life?
I think what makes me excited about life is being able to have an inner feeling or an inner thought, and then you try to put it out. Now, the day you try to get a glimpse of what it has become, I think that excites me a lot. I like to see something that I was thinking about coming to reality.
Yeah, that's cool. My final question, which is a signature question on the podcast, is who would you like to see on this podcast next as a guest? And you're gonna help me connect me to that person.
Okay. I think this one in particular, I'm going to ask, yes, and because earlier I even had a conversation with him. He's called Emma. Emma is the guy behind the videos you see on my Instagram that usually come out, I think, monthly. He's the guy behind uh, a recording brand called Met Media. He's so passionate about tour tourism and tour photography. So he has actually this year he was able to capture the Renzori Peak, the Kilimanjaro Peak, and also the Elgon Peak. So that's how enthusiastic he is.
Nice.
And I actually earlier talked to him, and now that you're asking me to connect to you to him, surely I'm going to do that because he's the guy behind. He met me at Vumbla, Uganda, out of the blue, and he just kept coming to me and recording every piece of code.
Jeff, I gotta say before I let you go that you've been a blessing in my life. I thank God that He brought you to be a guest of the podcast. Um, Even if the listeners don't find it interesting, at least you know you've spoken to somebody's heart, like, and that's me. I've learned, and I'm sure I just say that, but I know the listeners will learn a thing or two, will learn something from the words you just said. There was a part by Bible wegamba, I think it was Paul ngagamba nti no Katonda ne bw'aba tanyambye, I will still like trust in him or something like that. So like I would just say that, like, even if the listeners don't find it interesting, at least you know somebody listened to it and somebody found it interesting. So I appreciate you, and I'll keep following you, following your work, keep doing what you're doing. I support everything you do, and
Thank you very
you got a fun out here, and we'll keep the connection. And is there any final word
Thank
you
you
want to
very
say
much.
to the listeners?
Yeah, I'll just end by appreciating you still. Thank you very much for giving an opportunity to, let me say, startup creatives like us, different spheres, different backgrounds, and then being able to use your time, full hour of uh, an audience is not so easy, especially in this fast moving world. But someone really giving out an opportunity to another person to share their story, to share their moments of life. I'll just say God should bless you more than your expectations because this is really good
Thank
to us.
you. Thank you. All right, Joe. Keep doing what you're doing, and have a good Sunday. Sunday evening. Yeah.
Nice Sunday evening too.
All right, Kali boss. See you. Peace out. Hey there, this is Bonnie Kibuka, the host of the Ugandan Boy Talk Show. Thanks for watching and listening to my podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you share it with a friend and recommend somebody to this podcast. Don't forget to leave a feedback on this podcast because that's how we grow. And also don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. Join us on our social media platforms on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. So we would love to hear from you. Thank you very much and be blessed.